HuHa 2, ha!
Happy Harry's HuHa 2 Patridge!
Welcome, foolish mortals, to episode 6 of Happy Harry's HuHa 2 How-Tos, with I, your host, Harry Patridge, and you, your host, you. And today we're going to be looking at character design. So what is character design and why is it important? Well, basically, any conceivable kind of story that you would wish to tell visually will require some kind of character, be they human or vacuum cleaner or platypus or whatever. In fact, the only examples of animation that I can really think of that don't have a specific character in them is maybe something like the work of Oscar Fischinger, who animated lots of kind of wacky shapes. And if you've seen Ratatouille, there's kind of an homage to his work in that when every time Remy eats a weird combination of food and all those kind of crazy shapes appear around his head. Of course, people that animate something like an effect for a movie, like a CG animator doing a tidal wave for a disaster movie, isn't technically animating a character. Although things like that, sort of non-anthropomorphic beings like that can still have a degree of character to them, and I think we'll be able to come to that later. But for the time being, we're going to hop into the more literal end of things and look at character design for any kind of animation, specifically for 2D. Now, one of the most obvious things that you're going to need to get across first is the kind of gender identification of your character, and by that I don't mean whether or not they're male or female. I mean, is your character masculine or feminine? And there are lots of ways that we can kind of get that across. Typically, men, for example, tend to have bigger builds and be taller. I'd say that you should concentrate on fleshing out the sort of upper half of a male character by creating a more pronounced musculature up in the torso and the shoulders and the arms. In fact, I might have pushed things a little bit too far here. He's a little bit too Olympian, but whatever, we'll stick with it for the time being. And I'm not going to have time, I'm afraid, to go into all the details of the male anatomy, because that's just too much of a huge area to discuss. And though I'd love to talk about the female anatomy, I'm afraid I can't talk about that either. So really, if you're going to deliver sort of realistic-looking characters in your animation, and I've learned everything from looking at Radioactive Man on The Simpsons, but if you're going to look into that, then I really would suggest doing your research elsewhere. There are a lot of great anatomy books out there and resources online that can teach you about male sort of physiology and female physiology. Now, notice I'm not concentrating on here on the party zone, because if I did that, then I think we'd give the game away far too quickly as to whether this character was male or female or not. But notice the character has pretty big hands. They're bulky all around, and we're working in quite a lot of sharp angles. Now, of course, whether or not you have sharp angles or smooth lines in your animation is really more of a creative decision that will happen based on your drawing style, but there's no reason that you can't have characters with both. And I'd say as a general rule, men tend to have more of those sharp kind of geometric lines worked into them. I think in episode 1 I said geological when I meant to say geometric, and somebody called me out for that. And I felt like such a fool. But let's just go into the head quickly. And I'm only sketching here, so things are very, very sort of rushed and hashed out. But again, that sort of rule of working in those sharp angles can apply with the jawline, creating a more pronounced jaw, the nose, and every facial feature, really. And of course, male characters tend to have different hairstyles and that sort of thing. But that's, again, that's more down to costuming and hair, which we'll look at later on. Okay, now it's time to look at the feminine. And I'd say that as a general rule, women tend to have a more fragile and delicate build all over. Hopefully I don't have any raging activists come after me for that bombshell, but it tends to be true. And like I say, we're kind of dealing with the realm of cliché right now, and there's no reason that you cannot have masculine women and feminine men. Reminds me of that old song from the 1920s. Masculine women and feminine men, which is the rooster and which is the hen? Sorry, people think that I'm 107 years old now. But, sorry, one thing that I'd say, I'm getting off track here, one thing I'd say that women are actually bigger usually in the hips and thighs department. One of my favourite departments, in fact. And in that area they tend to be bigger than men. But again, you see, I'm working in smoother lines here, which I do think fit with feminine characters better than with male characters, but there's no reason that you can't mix that up. And it's really down to your individual style. Okay, now naturally they're bigger in the bosom, but we'll make that a little less extreme than my usual characters. And the arms are daintier, the hands are smaller and not quite as dramatic looking as the male counterparts. And the head again echoes that same design approach, with the smoother lines being worked in. Ooh, she looks a little bit surprised. And now let's give her some hair. Okay, so enough hardcore nudity. Let's move on to the really exciting stuff, the elderly. Now, there will come a time where you need to show whether or not a character is old or young, and I'd say as a great general rule for visually showing age, remember down. Everything moves down as you get older. So if we have, you know, a kind of typical looking handsome man here, so incredibly handsome that it hurts, in fact, we could say that, you know, he's in his early 20s, or maybe he's a teen. I don't quite like his hairstyle, but, you know, he's individual, he's expressing himself. But how would we communicate to people that he's older? Well, like I say, remember the down rule. Things move down as you get older. The eyes begin to sag and bag, and the eyelids themselves will sort of move down. So we'll actually add some eye bags here. Now, we will need eventually to discuss the level of detail that you can work into 2D animated characters, and people have actually told me before, Harry, more is less, more is less. The less detailed line work that you have in a character, the easier they will be to animate. And though that is true, I actually am quite a fan of the more complicated character designs and seeing them move. So just remember that if you are dealing with a character with lots of wrinkles and eye bags, that the more detail you work in, the more problems you'll create for yourself later on. Now, another thing to remember with old people, those bloody old people, is that one thing that continues to grow as you get older is your ears and your nose. Now, I already have a bloody big nose, so I don't particularly look forward to the prospect of it getting even bigger. But remember, a big nose as you get older will definitely help with that effect. Now, one thing that actually gets smaller and more sunken is the amount of fat on a face. Now, the fat kind of remains, but again, it moves down, and one reason you'll see in movies that old people makeup is kind of difficult to get to look right is because it's impossible to scoop out someone's face. You can only add to it. So we can fortunately scoop out of our character here and actually give him less cheekbones. So we're going to sort of take the fat out of his cheeks and move it down to the lower portion of his face to create a more sort of jowled look here. So that's pretty useful for creating an old look. And the fat sort of leaves the lips, so you get this kind of mummified looking dried up mouth, which, you know, I'm sure I'll have one too, so I can't complain. The neck too, the skin around the neck will sag, so we get that kind of droopy dog, sort of turtle look. And of course our fantastic hairstyle from before has now totally left us to just leave a little bit of hair around the side, because of course the older you get, the less hair you have, typically, unless you're the Wolfman or something. But on the other side of things, when you get younger, not when you get younger, when you are younger, when you're drawing younger characters, I don't know, you might have age regression in your story if you're one of those people on those funny fetish websites, but I'd say typically the head in itself is smaller, but the eyes maintain their size. So if we have a younger character here, in fact, I'm going to stick with the eyes that we had originally. But the head itself is going to be smaller. And really all of the facial features shrink down, especially the nose and especially the ears, so we've really just created the opposite of the effect that the elderly character had at the beginning. And here we've sort of created a younger looking character by shrinking down all those facial features, maybe giving the character more hair, but everything else is smaller. The other thing that we have, of course, more of, is the fat around the face. So really, it's just sort of pushing that slider like a character section on a video game to create a younger looking character. We've just created the sort of fatter cheeks and the smaller facial features. Pushed to the other end of the scale, we get the elderly character. And that really applies across the whole board, throughout the whole body. And just a quick word on body types. There really is too much for me to cover here, so I suggest looking at reference material as much as you can, be it online or in films or books or games or whatever. But one tip that I think has helped me is to keep the hands and feet of your characters consistent, no matter how different the sort of body archetypes end up as. And I think we've got an example here of a sort of little weedy guy and a big strong guy, but their hands and their feet are pretty much identical in proportion, and that helps to exaggerate the rest of their body where all the bulk is, or the lack thereof in this guy's case. But it also applies to with the size of their head. So if we keep this one consistent and give him nerdy spectacles, and fuck it, let's do it the exact same thing on this guy and give him big teeth and nerdy spectacles too, you can see it kind of gives us a satisfying but funny looking set of proportions. Now, on top of the basic stuff we've looked at, like gender and age and body type, there are things like hair and clothes styles, and the character's pose and facial features, and these are all really important things that you will have to really learn to be able to draw, and we can't go into every single one of those things today. But what we can do is the really interesting stuff, which will actually help bring personality out of our character and see how we bring those things together. Now, I'm going to have me some fun, and I'm going to do that by throwing out kind of a random character, like for example an untrustworthy teenage girl, and see if I can bring that to fruition visually just based on that short little blurb about the character. So why not start with the untrustworthy teenage girl? And I'll try to talk you through my working as I go. Now, I'm saying if she's a teenage girl, she has a fairly large head because she's a younger character, and I'm going to give her this sort of hunched over look. I'm thinking rat when I think untrustworthy, and I really want to bring that sort of rat-like appearance into every aspect of a character. Not that I have any kind of problem with teenage girls in general. Most of the ones that I've known are lovely, apart from the ones that broke my heart as a teenage boy. But now that I'm a fat old man, it's okay, I think, to say you like teenage girls. Maybe not. So, working into her character, these rat-like features, I've gone with a big nose here, and I'm going to give her glasses. Not that I think rats have glasses, most of the rats I see tend to not have glasses, but I think, when I think untrustworthy, I think of a close attention to detail and kind of conniving, and I think glasses help bring that out. I'm going to give her greasy hair. I don't think she's too preoccupied with her appearance, and a big chin, because I think that sort of helps the sort of pointy sharpness of her nature, and big ears, because again that sort of helps with the rat-like function of her character. Now I'm going to give her a few spots as well, because hey, she's a teenage girl, shit happens, and she's going to have long sort of fingers, but I'll build that up when I get to the clean-up stage. And I think she's going to have quite ratty clothes, and I say ratty in a different sense. I mean that they're sort of tatty and not particularly well kempt, just because when I think of someone who's very conniving and mischievous, they could actually be very sort of physically attractive. They could present themselves as a thing that they're not. But in this case, I think we're going to go for the more stereotypical sort of skeezy, snitchy liar. Sounds terrible. Actually, let's turn her into a teenage boy. I don't want to be labelled as a sexist. Actually, I can't do that at this stage. No, come on. It's 2013, people. She can be a teenage girl. Right, so we'll flesh out those big ugly ears. Oh, come on. She's got to be one sex. So the fact that I arrived on teenage girl is completely arbitrary, but she has greasy, lank hair that's sort of falling into nowhere, and I think actually let's give her those big cat eyeglasses. She's got kind of an Edna Mode thing here. Now the eyes are going to be darting to look behind her because, hey, she's told a lot of lies and she needs to make sure that no one's coming after her. So she has a big nose. Actually, let's give her a little wry smile because that to me screams untrustworthy more than anything. And a couple of spots. And her hair is hanging down on the other side. Now, actually, I think I've gone for kind of a bland hairstyle here, so I'm going to work on it a little more. Let's give her a little ponytail at the back. Brilliant. And I don't really know how I can show she's a teenager, but I'm going to give her a school uniform here with her clothing. Now, school uniforms I don't think are something that's particularly big in the States, but over here, basically, if you're a teenager and you go to school, you'll have a uniform of some kind. She has little spindly fingers. I think the thin fingers give her a kind of impression that she might be able to use them in a devilish way. And let's give her a little collar and a little tie for a school uniform and a little cardigan, and get through this quickly now. But overall, we've built a kind of thin, wiry looking, hunched over character. Little pointy boots I think will help to sort of make her look like she's some kind of animal. And there we have it. Let's design a character now who's really keen to be your best friend and is really eager to please, worryingly so. Now, I'd like to design a character that isn't too preoccupied with having sort of a job or a costume that we need to draw, like a clown or a chef or something like that. Instead, I'd really like to concentrate on purely the body language and the sort of facial expression and facial features of this character to help support his personality. Because ultimately, that's the real challenge. Anyone can draw a cop uniform, but to be able to draw, you know, a selfish cop or a nervous cop, that is the stuff that really takes some skill and some thought behind it. So, okay, this guy's really eager to please. I'm going to give him really big, open eyes. And I think they're open because he's forcing them to be open in the hopes that you'll sort of look at him and catch his eye back. And I think I'm going to give him a really forced smile, really push his cheeks up high, almost like it's too forced. Now, I think, actually, let's have his pupils look up slightly, because I'm imagining he's going to be short, so he's going to have to look up at everyone. And I think that sort of shortness helps contribute to his apparent vulnerability, because he's a little guy and he's sort of scared and is very self-conscious, and I think that's what's going to make him look so eager to please. Now, I think a big key part of his personality is the eyebrows. Giving him sad, drooping eyebrows, I think, will help to make it look like he's not, you know, particularly happy with his station in life and would like to have more friends than he does. He just doesn't. Actually, I'm going to have one hand sort of forcing his face up, pushing his cheeks even further, but I'm going to have another one sort of beckoning out, sort of almost like he'd like to grab your attention, but he's not quite sure if he wants to, because he doesn't know if you'll judge him. And with the legs, again, we need to think about the pose here. I might have one leg hanging back, almost like he's nervous again and doesn't really know if he should push himself forward, but he is very, very eager. He just doubts himself. Okay, let's get this guy cleaned up and we'll see how he looks. Again, this is a really difficult thing to do because we've taken away, you know, we've given him a gender and roughly an age. He sort of looks middle-aged, but we're not really dealing anymore in the realm of, is he a pilot? Is he a supermodel? We're really just worrying about other aspects of his personality, who he is underneath, really. I think making him bald, too, helps make him look like he might doubt himself. It's a cliche, of course, to say that anyone who's bald might have confidence issues, but in character design, oftentimes you will need to rely on cliche. Let's give him sort of clenched teeth here. And I think only when you have characters who are on screen for a long time do you really get the chance to break down those cliches and instead deliver a character who's more unique. But for example, going back to the chef character, if you need to have a scene in a restaurant and communicate instantly that someone is a chef, hey, it's a pretty good idea to put them in a cheesy old chef hat. Even if you don't see real people in real life, real chefs kind of wearing this big mushroom cloud hats like that, it can help to immediately communicate what you're trying to do in your story. Okay, let's blast through this guy really quickly. He's got his little kind of beckoning hand. Actually, I might have him more reaching. Like he's sort of waving and reaching at the same time. I'm not 100% sure what that body language is, but I think it works for his character. He's kind of a little sort of Elmer Fudd looking guy. And give him those sad eyebrows once more. A big bald head. And there we go. Okay, so I'm going to do one last character design challenge today, and just to show that I'm not picking on human beings only, let's do a nice proud toaster, okay? And how do you make a toaster look proud? Well, I'm going to say that anyone who's proud is kind of leaning back and sticking their chest out, in which case this isn't a chest, it's actually sort of the front part of the toaster, but he's got a little lever down here. But he's sort of puffing his chest out to say, "Drink me in, world, here I am." And give him little feet too. And maybe the feet would actually be sort of more splayed out like that, to sort of give him a nice wide, cocky stance. And maybe a little shine too, because hey, you know, he's gleaming. He's so proud. Now, I have to admit, designing characters who don't even have facial features is so difficult. Really, all you have to rely on is posture at this point, and really all we can do is have the character lean back and maybe a few other little things like that, like with the feet and with the shine. But hey, it can be done, and I want you guys, when you do your character design, to bear in mind how your characters hold themselves and walk and talk and things like that. It's not just to do with the way that they look, but in the interest of referencing old obscure 90s animated films, let's make our toaster even more anthropomorphized and give him some facial features. Just get this cleaned up here, put in that little lever there. In fact, let's have a little piece of toast popping out, which might actually help to show people it's a toaster, and those little feet widely splayed out. And I don't know, if you're proud, you'll probably have closed eyes. Actually looks like a chef with the kind of little piece of toast. Makes him look like he's wearing a hat. Anyway, he's got now, let's have that nose stick up. Really kind of gives him that superior air. And a really smug little smile. And there we have it, y'all. A proud toaster. And why is he proud? Well, because he's just finished episode 6 of his animation tutorial series. I guess that means I'm a toaster. See you next week, folks. Bye-bye.